Hey folks, John Kelly. Welcome back to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Hey guys, I've got Chris Hoyer with us today, retired Leo, author of When That Day Comes, Training for the Fight. It's an amazing book. He's a warrior in every sense of the word, man. Cop out in Phoenix for 20 plus years. And in that relatively short period of time, 4 deadly encounters, came out on top on all of them physically, but mentally, man, it's been a fucking ride. And we're going to get into some use of forces. We're going to get into training. We're going to get into what you need to do and what you need to know if you're going to be in this thing of ours to keep you ahead of the curve, man. Because, you know, Murphy's going to come and visit you as he always does. And on that day, when that day comes, we both want you to be prepared. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Chris Hoyer to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Brother, man, it's good to see you again.
You too, man. It's my honor to be here. Thanks, John. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So you've got this book, When That Day Comes, and you know, it's intimidating to look at, but then I opened it up and you got every other space in big letters. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's how we're doing this. Good stuff, brother. I really enjoyed your book. And one of the things that struck me was your reflection and like, you're like, you know what, that wasn't what I did without, there was a better way to do that. And I think a lot of times when somebody authors a book, it's so sanitized that it's like, you know, I'm the authority and, you know, we hit the door and, you know, and you just go, that's really awesome, man. I'm not sure what I learned from that, but, and you've got like a bunch of teachable moments in this book, and you talk about your feelings, you talk about your emotions, you talk about when you were in a good place and when you weren't. And I just, you know, I kind of got lost in it, man. I started relating on so many different levels. But before we get into your work history and your life story and some of your challenges and your deadly force encounters, give the listener and the viewer a little backstory on Chris, and so that can bring us up to, you know, how awesome you are.
Oh shit. Absolutely. Well, going back to the book really quick, thank God. I
Yeah.
was to meet my now girlfriend who did all the editing for us. And that's how the book ended up being so pretty, because of her, thank goodness. Because
Yeah. No, bro, I figured it would have been in crayon if you had any say in it.
Oh, dude, it was 100% caps. No.
No, you're awesome, man.
She's looking at it going, dude, what is this? I'm like,
What
this is how
what are you doing to me?
whatever. So my name's Chris. You guys know that. I was born in New Hampshire, almost on the Woodstock lawn in 1969.
There you go.
Which explains a lot about my upbringing. So bounced around a little bit from my young years up to my teenage years, from Virginia to New Hampshire, back and forth, and then followed my first love, or so I thought, out to Arizona. And not long after I got there, she bailed on me and left me kind of high and dry, and stuck it out. I stayed there from 91 until 2019, and of course did all my Phoenix PD time from 97 to 2018. So
okay, that's a good run.
I made it 20 years and 64 days, and I'll tell you once we get more into the story why I physically retired, and it's not going to be anything that you would expect.
Okay. So, yeah, man. And so speaking to that, you know, you start the book off, you know, it's kind of like, hey, these are some, you kind of walk us into your career. Like, hey, this is the way I approach these kind of situations. These are some things that I recommend you do. These are some things I recommend you don't do. Um, Kind of like a guide, a guidebook for an officer to kind of get a foundation and establish, you know, like how he wants to roll. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I gotta throw it out there because it's one of the biggest moments of my entire life. After I did the first copy, and then I realized that I needed to add some more to the second edition, I reached out to Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, who did an unbelievable forward for me. I mean, I just absolutely love the guy 20 different ways, one of my heroes.
Yeah.
And his quote is, and this is straight from him, because I mean, okay, I'll take it on board only because I believe him. He says one of the best law enforcement prep books he's ever read. I'm like, holy shit,
Yeah.
but you're Dave Grossman, man. Oh my goodness. So,
Yeah. No,
it was huge.
it blows you away that guy would have such a high opinion of absolutely, man.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I still just kind of consider myself an absolute just regular guy. I just happen to survive a bunch of critical incidents and crazy circumstances. But
Right.
beyond that, nothing special. So
And and speaking about, those critical incidents, 4 shootings over the course of your career. Um, and your the first one, nobody was shooting back on the first one, right?
no, although that one, believe it or not, was the worst of the 4. And I'll tell
Okay.
you, so, yeah, it sounds crazy. And if you look at my career, it was a stair step to my career. So my first several outings were it was I could have shot a dog like 3 different times, almost, and then what ended up being my first real shooting was a dog.
Right.
I call it my first shooting. But that was a fight to the death, no kidding. And it sounds really bad to say it this way, and I won't apologize for it, but I don't mind shooting people because they're stupid. They know what they're doing. But a dog doesn't know any better,
Dog
man.
just being a dog, man.
Exactly. And I mean, even though it was 150-pound Roddy got a hold of my gun hand, I
Yeah.
still got the scar, and this was 1999. And that was the last thing I wanted to do is have to kill an animal. And I had no choice, and I did.
Right.
But what I learned from that was like, man, this is the beginning of, if it's not me, what if it's that mom jogging with her kids, or the kids in the playground across the street and he comes after them? Thank God it happened to me. I had the capability to
Yeah,
do what I
you
need.
had a means to take care to address the problem.
And it was horrible. I hated it. I still am like just devastated over that whole thing. But
Yeah. You know what? It's all right, man. Animal lovers understand that statement all too well, right? I think we sometimes we have a tendency to care more about our pets and animals than we do other human beings, right?
yeah,
So it's not a fault, man. It's just it's the reality of things.
yeah,
And
oh, yeah.
so you get through your first critical incident, your first shooting, and on to the second.
Right. So that was a real shooting, if you will. So that one turned into be basically it started as a pursuit in another part of town, ended up in my area. And for folks that haven't read the book yet, you got to understand I was a resident ship magnet in 3 separate precincts over my 20 years.
You were
So
the guy.
I was that guy, right? So in fact, it was so funny because I met a dispatcher that told me 2 days ago I had never met her in person, and she said that she knew about me and she was afraid to meet me in person because she wasn't sure how that meeting was going to go, because she was actually the one that worked my shooting, but she never met me in person.
Isn't that
And
funny?
yeah, it was so strange. So, talking 24 years later, here we are,
I know. Wow. That's the
Yeah.
universe again.
It was crazy, man. But that one, that was a crazy one too, because just like with the dog thing, it was a stair step of, 3 other times prior, I was slacked out on the trigger and then the
Yeah.
guy just, or whatever. This one was a different kind of set of circumstances. And I gotta touch on this just a little bit. The reason I survived that critical incident was because of what I had done prior to, which was playing the what if game. And I
Right.
had done that for the last basically 2 years. What if, what if, what if? I come around the corner, I face a guy with a gun. A guy approaches my car, wants to talk to me. What do I do? Can I escape?
Do I
All
have
the
my gun out? What am I? How am I? Yeah.
absolutely 100%. So when I got to this one, it was the last thing I would ever have expected. The guy sitting in a car, and basically what I had to do was like kick the window of the car to get the guy to stop doing what he was doing. And unfortunately, he ended up pulling a gun and just wasn't quick enough on the draw, so I put him down.
Right.
But that was one thing I would have never thought of in a million years. But now, because I thought it all the way through to here, now I can start from zero and just go straight to the top, which is what happened. So thank God. So
Right. Yeah. And it's, you know, um, in between us talking about your different incidents, I want to kind of maybe we can interject some training and some mindset. Because I think unfortunately, Chris, I spent some time in training and I was blessed and we would run some really, I think, progressive scenarios, hood drills, quick reaction drills, um, to give you training doesn't provide you the skill sets. It identifies weaknesses on where you need to do more work, right? In training, we can't ever provide you the number of repetitions on a training afternoon that you need to become proficient in
Right.
handling your rifle, your handgun, your hand-to-hand skills, or even how you talk to people, right? We just kind of bring to light, you know what? This is a potential situation. Have a plan. Come up with a plan before it happens. And
Absolutely.
so you've been doing that in your career, that
Yep.
what if game. Um, some of the skill sets, the things that you were doing in that what if game to prepare you for your second encounter. What were some of them, Chris?
Well, it was you know, playing the game of this is what the win looks like. I never even considered the idea of, if I get shot, what do I do? Which is actually a pretty good tool to have in your box, because one of my really good buddies on the department, he got shot in the arm and his partner got shot in the head, and they both survived it. It was unbelievable. But when you go back and listen to that audio, when Nick was shot in the arm, you can hear that he's pretty fired up, and he
Right.
let that fuel him into, oh, we're done, dude. And he went after the guy, of course, and they won the day. And that was a huge part for what they did, because they had done a lot of the regular mental preparation sort of stuff, but physically they had also trained their brain to fight through all the pain, God forbid. And he got shot. I mean, I saw the X-ray photo, and the bullet is like a centimeter from his bone, and
Right.
but he fought through, won the day, and then he came out great on the other side. So it was awesome. So
I think a lot of times, in training, remember for the longest time early on in training, if you were shot, you were out,
yep. Oh yeah. Oh, I that's I
right?
got on that.
Right?
I have the absolute healthiest sense of humor when I'm doing my force on force stuff or whatever
Yeah.
else. And I have a kid, I call him a kid. If you get shot and you're like, oh, I'm dead, the fuck you are. You're not dead
Yeah,
till I,
man.
and I absolutely do not tolerate that one bit. I'm like, you're gonna fight through that shit, because if you do that there in training, you're probably gonna correlate that
Right.
onto the street, and it's not
We
okay.
didn't we didn't realize that we're training our people to fail, to give
Absolutely.
up,
Yeah.
what
And I
no,
don't
you're
allow it flat out.
yeah,
I tell them in the beginning, I'm like, I'm not. You can joke and kid around with me all day long, but when it comes to that, I am dead
no,
serious about it. I don't play. So,
you're never out of the fight. If you're breathing, you're never out of the fight.
amen, amen.
And that's something I think, I love when we train, I love busting balls. I love I love keeping the air exciting and but when we kick the door, when we
Yep,
enter the room, when we hit our hard corners, it's all business, man. And
absolutely.
when we're done, we'll go back to busting each other's balls, but business is business. And and having that dichotomy, that being able to be lighthearted when it's permissible,
Yep.
but treating training, I think we need to get back to a seriousness of training, because um there's so many distractions out there, Chris, right? So many things that don't matter that we as officers and deputies are concerning ourselves with.
Right. Oh yeah.
Shit doesn't matter that's going on at a different level in the country, with organizations and defunded. Who gives a shit?
I agree.
Um, because I'm not going to say it's not if that day comes. When that day comes, all it's going to matter is what you've done to prepare yourself to keep you and everybody on your squad going home.
Well, here's a real simple task that I learned as well. I had a phenomenal FTO. He taught me how to chase bad guys. Couldn't teach me how to prepare a report or take an accident, but whatever. That's another story.
Another story.
But what I figured out was, man, just if you go back to the day, when you're sitting in the background investigator's office going, I'll do whatever it takes. Okay. Okay, let's just start with that. And then you realize the freaking trauma of going through the hiring process is a giant pain in the ass. then you get through all that, and then you get to the academy, and you're getting your ass kicked for me, it was only 4 months, luckily. For most, it's 6 months. So 4 to 6 months of getting your ass kicked every day doing shit, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, and you're getting paid to learn.
Yep.
How do you go wrong with that?
Nope.
And then you get on FTO, and your FTO is being he's being a pain in the ass too. He's barking at you every day because you can't figure out how to turn on the computer or whatever your stupid problem is that day. But when you get past all that shit, and I remember because I wrote this part of the story in the book, when you go through all that, and then you're sitting at the gate for the first time solo in the car, you're going, man, I'm the cops. Now what do I do? Right?
Yeah, it shit just got real.
And then when you get out there and you start getting screamed at for the first time, and then you realize, man, I went through all this shit to be able to wear this badge. This over here should be easy.
Right.
And if you kind of think about it from that standpoint, where like, you have any idea what I had to go through just to be able to wear this friggin' uniform, and when you get to that stage, you should have a tremendous amount of pride with that alone, all by itself,
100%.
You just take it on board from there. You're like, dude, whatever, man. I'm getting paid. You're having a bad day. You give them the attention that they deserve, because they do as citizens and so forth.
Right.
You start getting into the personal shit, and you're worried about everything else going on, like with your buddies, up in Canada. It's like, man, you can't worry about what everybody else is doing over here. You got to focus on yourself so you can take care of you. You can start taking care of everybody else. So
yeah, that's 100%, man. 100%. And you weren't always great at taking care of you. No. And so if you would, with the goal of maybe letting some guys know that, and some girls know that there's a better way. Before we got to your third shooting and then ultimately your final critical incident, what were some things that you think you could have been doing to start building that resiliency toolbox, man, that we talk about?
Well, quit being an arrogant shit, for starters. Because even though I was never, like, oh man, I smoked that dude, whatever else, I was never that guy.
Right.
But I was also kind of on the side of, you can't touch me because I'm 10 feet tall. Look at me, I'm wearing a vest and a gun, and I'm a badass. I'm having that survival attitude, which is really healthy. It's very, very healthy to have that you can't lose mentality, which is great. But don't let that cross over into nothing bad can touch me, because that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, so, you're not infallible.
Amen. Absolutely. And that was part of me where everything was going fine. And the biggest thing, one of the biggest lessons that I learned from my experiences was, I let all that stuff consume me throughout the years. And instead of taking a step back, and I say it in a joking way, when you get to that point where you're driving through McDonald's drive-through for whatever reason, and you answer, does this complete your order? And you answer with 10-4, you're too consumed in the law enforcement community.
Yeah,
you need to take back, right?
You're days away from getting your badge number tattooed on your ass,
Right, exactly. I know. Right? So, when you realize that you need to take a step back from time to time, like regularly, and not only escape the law enforcement community, and even some of your friends that are just cops, go outside and do other things that are not cop related, or even firefighter related, or whatever your career happens to be, and take those times to forget everything that you do and enjoy life, because you don't ever know if you're going to be walking in the door the next day or not. So
right, that's so important, because I think we have a tendency, right, don't we, that everybody we associate with off duty are the same people we're with all the time on duty.
Right, exactly.
And that's just not healthy, man.
I mean, it can be, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying ignore your friends and stuff like that, especially like the buddy checks like we talked about last night.
Right, man.
But don't get so overwhelmed with, this is who I am, because yeah, you are a cop. It is who you are, but it's also your career. It's your profession. It doesn't rule your life. If you let it shouldn't rule your life. So
yeah, no, that's a great point, man. Know who you are, man. Don't lose your identity.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. You're a cop. That's what you do. Right. But you're Chris Hoyer first.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a dad, you're a son, you're a brother, you're a husband, or what you're so much more than what the job is. And I think that having that balance, I think, is important.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was fun. I mean, until my 18th year, I had the time of my life. I'm like, are you kidding me? I get to do this shit and get paid for it,
Right.
you know? And I had a lot of fun, but I was so wrapped up in the career, which, you know, it sounds like you came out luckily on your side. I didn't come out so lucky on my side
Yeah, man.
because I ended up in a divorce, of course, like so many of us do. And it wasn't because, you know, I wasn't committed to the family thing. I was more committed to the work thing, and the family just got put on the back burner for way too long.
Isn't that fucked up, bro? How we do that?
Yeah.
You're a smart guy. You're a smart guy. I'm moderately intelligent. Why do we do that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? There was something that you said last night that I wanted to touch on a little bit. And for folks that don't know the power of our story, the great community that we do once a week for the law enforcement side and the veteran side of stuff. But you made a comment where you don't have to be home. And I remembered that. I'm like, you know, for me, it was a little bit different because I was pointed out, I was called out by my former boss, who's still one of my closest friends. He goes, you don't want to be home, you know, and I'm like, you know, because at some level you have to be home. You got to be taking care of kids, doing the homework, going to Walmart, all that sort of shit. I didn't want to be home.
Right.
And that was a huge wake up call for me. I'm like, oh my God. It wasn't because I was so much in love with the job. It was so much that, you know, the things I can control on the street, chasing bad guys and the pursuits and all the adrenaline dumping shit. I wasn't getting that at home. You know, home was work. I'm like, fuck that. I don't want to go. I don't want to be called out because, you know, whatever the situation that particular day happened to be. And I was like, I can go to work and be in charge of everything. And I can go home and be in charge of nothing. You know, so
You yeah, you explained that perfectly, man. At work, I'm somebody.
yeah.
At home, I'm just the guy who takes out the trash and gets yelled at if I don't wash the dishes.
Exactly.
You know?
No, okay. And I'll say this out loud, especially in the law enforcement community, but you know, on some level, that is what we volunteered for. And when you
Right.
get married, that's what you volunteered for. You
Right.
knew that probably before you got into it, you know, and on some level, you got to take that, you got to accept that responsibility, you know, and at some
Sure.
point in time, you're like, well, what does she know? Or what does he know? Fuck that. You know, I can do whatever I want.
Right.
And,
Not really. No, that doesn't. No. So that brings us to your third shooting. Is that around 2016?
2013. Yeah.
2013? Your third shooting. How did that play a role in what's going on with you?
It was that one was actually pretty easy too. And the fact of the matter is, let me go back. So the dog thing was one whole, you know, catalyst. And then
Right.
the bad guy. The reason that none of my shootings, the first three never bothered me because they made the decision and I reacted to it. You know,
Right.
the shooting was no different. This particular one was one of your typical things you see the guys driving around the city for like 35 or 40 minutes, just just terrorizing shit. I mean, just really bad.
Yeah, man.
And when the first major critical incident happened before the shooting, if you will, basically what the guy did is he rammed his huge truck into the back of a semi tanker truck. And what he's trying to do is roll the truck going down the freeway and make the thing explode and take us out of the fight. And I'm like, holy shit. I told my partner, I said, dude, we're going to shoot this guy.
Yeah, man.
Sure as shit. About 35 minutes later, so Scotty, my partner's outside the front of our Tahoe. I'm outside the driver's door. And as he's driving by, it was a shooting. It wasn't a gunfight.
Gotcha.
This one was with our rifles.
Right.
So no, now you can see that stair step process I talked about
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah, man.
Almost a dog to a dog, almost a bad guy to the bad guy. Now we've stepped up from 2 handgun shootings now to a rifle shooting.
You're deploying the rifle on them. Yeah.
So that was a whole different dynamic too, which is like, okay. But again, that one's pretty easy because he made the decision and we responded to it. That was really a no-brainer. Right. So
it was just not too many options available to you.
You know, and it was one of those things too, where it was kind of a strange dynamic because the guy was driving past us and Scotty's probably about 5 yards ahead of me, you know, and there was a street sign and we talked about it after. We had trained together considerably a lot of really good stuff. And his thought process was, well, when that guy hits that sign, if he doesn't stop, I'm going to light him up. Well, 5 yards to the north, if you will, I've got my street sign, and I said the exact same thing. And I'm like, when he gets to that sign, that's my breaking point. I'm gonna light
Right.
him up.
You're past the point of no return.
Exactly, and that's what it was. And we collectively put 15 rounds in the guy. I put 9. Scotty put actually 16. He put 7 in this guy's door, and that ultimately ended the fight. So
Right. And that's the other thing I think, drawing back from that experience is training with the people that you work with.
oh yeah,
Um, I came from a fairly large agency, and the only units that trained together were specialized units.
oh yeah,
But the guys on patrol, you would never train with the guys on your shift unless your sergeant said, "Hey, let's do some training, some inert training in the parking lot. Let's set up some felony stops, and we're gonna walk through these things together as a squad, right?" But you also need it to not be rocking and rolling to do that, right? And so, it was kind of a tough dynamic to get training time in with the guys that you actually patrolled with. But speak to the importance of that, if you would.
there's a huge problem with that, of course, because number one, I mean, I know everybody in the whole world is going to say the exact same thing. We don't have time. We hit the ground running, and we're like with Phoenix, man. We had, when I was on patrol, when I left in 02 to go to my specialty squad, it was, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 calls during the day, and you've only got 4 or 5 guys to handle them all. Some of these are bigger calls, and it ties up a guy for 3 or 4 hours, and on a Friday night, we're talking like 70 or 80 calls a night, easy, same kind of thing. Even on double squad night, you don't have enough bodies to cover them all. And so that's the first problem. Second problem is, and I'm not gonna lie, because I was faced with this a lot. You got guys that you just don't want to work with. You're like, dude, this guy's
It's
a
reality,
slob.
right? It's reality.
It is very much reality, and I hate it, and I've been called out for doing stupid shit as everybody else has. And I've also been the guy to call out other guys. I'm like, hey, dude, what was that shit? Oh yeah, and if you've got that maturity to talk about stuff and you're thick skinned about it, and you realize, oh yeah, why did I do that? I completely fucked that up for
Right,
whatever
right.
reason. One key thing that I did with all the patrol squads that I worked with when I went to my specialty squad was, all right, you guys all know that when we respond to whatever kind of a major critical incident happens to be, we need to have one guy designated as our negotiator. Because what happens, you get 7 or 8 people screaming at one guy, and I'd get out there and I'm like, everybody shut up. And I know that certain things call for certain circumstances. So like in one, I'm not trying to be at all sexist, but sometimes girls do better jobs at negotiating than the dudes do. Because
Right,
like this kind of shit, and the girl gets in
right.
there and so I would be like, I'd come out there and I'd piss some people off. I would
Right,
sometimes. Everybody shut the fuck up. All right, Janet, you're in charge. Speak. And I was never a supervisor by design.
right.
Wanted to be. And when we can have one person that can do the talking, everybody else can be set up tactically to figure out, do we have another threat? Do we have something we need to watch for? Is there traffic? Do we need to stop? All these kinds of things. And you do that on a regular basis, and it makes things much easier. So
Yeah. How many times, Chris, have we been on scenes or seen scenes where 5 guys are screaming 5 different things at one suspect, and it's a complete shit show? And
absolutely.
he doesn't know whether to shit or go blind, because one guy's telling him, "Show me your hands." One guy's telling him to get on the ground. One guy's telling him to spin around and lift up your shirt. I mean,
So I encourage people all the time to just take a basic SWAT negotiators class, whatever it is. You don't have to go through the whole school.
right,
Just do a whatever kind of a 10 or 12-hour class. And the way I handle that was I get out there and I'm like, look, man, first of all, focus on me. I go, what's your name? Oh, you're John. Okay, I'm Chris. Just pay attention to me, because all these guys, they all want to kill you. I
right.
don't. Focus
Don't
on
want
me.
to kill
That's
you.
where it started.
Right. No, man, that's no, and I think that's important. That there's another thing that you said I thought is real important. You're not a supervisor, but you're a leader.
Yeah,
It's
true.
important. Everybody has that potential.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of guys that would disagree with that. They're like, oh, you're just a hot dog. You're out there just to get into the shit. And I'm like, well, which is not untrue.
Right.
But there were times when, I'm the junior guy, but I was the first one there. I've got the intel. Let me run with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a fucking commander or whatever else. If you don't know, let me handle it, or
Right.
whatever. But
Yeah.
on the other side of the fence, when you are that senior guy and you get out there and you think you know more than the other guy, let this dude handle it. It may
Right.
just be because for no other reason that kid needs to gain that experience to be in charge of a scene or whatever else.
Sure.
So
No, those are some great lessons learned, man. And I think that brings us to our last shooting, which probably the as you were talking about the kind of the steps going up each level, this is the one that fucked you up the most.
oh yeah,
So if you don't mind, brother, can you take us back?
absolutely, of course. So handgun, rifle, shootings,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't know the difference between the shooting and a gunfight. You would think as a tactic trainer, got my first instructorship in 2000, firearms in 05, rifle in 2012, been in 3 shootings. I know my shit for the most part. And I teach guys how to do some stuff, a lot of basic tactical stuff, no big deal. But I get out there on this particular one and I'll kind of walk you through the call. So it's basically a burglary call. The kid shows up to the dad's house. They'd thrown him out of the house, but he still had mom's minivan that he'd been driving around. So he shows up to the house, kicks in the front door, gets into dad's safe and takes his handgun out of the safe. Calls dad, says, "Hey, I'm not feeling good, high on dope. I'm gonna have a shootout with the cops." Oh shit, that's a problem. So clearly, dad calls 911. We get down there to the area, and my at the time lieutenant gets on the radio and says, "Hey, is there a scout that can go down and check out the house?" And I happen to be plain clothes that day. Again, this is
Okay.
my 8th year. Been on what we call the neighborhood enforcement team at that time for 14 years. I've been doing this job for a freaking long time, not only on the force, but on the net squad. That's
Sure.
what I do. And so being the shit magnet that I was, my dumb ass, I'm like, oh, it's 2:30. I get off at 4. I still got time to get into something. Right.
Yeah, man. I can understand that philosophy.
Yeah, well, and that was my thought process. Plus, I
Right.
was at the station impounding marijuana. I'm like, I could be doing this, or I could be down there helping the guys. Well, fuck that. So I hopped in the car,
There you
shoot
go.
down. So technically, I was the first one on the actual scene of the house. The last bit of intel that we got was the kid's got a selfie with a gun to his head and a crack pipe in his mouth. Sends that picture to his dad. So we
Yeah.
know the guy he's serious. It's like, okay. And I was doing a thing up in just outside of LA a few months ago, and the guys that I was doing my public speaking presentation to were like, "Why would you even respond to that call?" Yeah, well, technically, is it illegal to be suicidal? No. Is it illegal that he kicked in the door? Technically, no, because he had standing in the house.
Right.
Uh, Mom let him use the minivan, so there was no report to be taken on the stolen there. So it's like, yeah, but he made a threat against law enforcement. He wants to shoot out with the cops. Is that a serious threat? I mean, you can go either way, but with us, with Phoenix, we're like, yeah, we play serious. We're gonna go to this call.
Yeah, and you know what, Chris, quite honestly, this is what has always bothered me about us having knowledge about a threat. If we don't deal with it, somebody else is going to have to. And they may not have the intel that you have. So the next squad guy comes on shift and he gets dispatched to a suspicious vehicle without the backstory of the threat, the gun, and the crack pipe. And he comes fucking bebopping up there thinking he's talking. We don't get to pick and choose, man. When people call us, we need to take action.
Well, the way we decided to make this a call for us that we're going to respond to was, is it a valid threat that can be carried out? Yes. He's got a gun. He's made the threat. It can be followed through. We're going. And then God forbid, this as well as I do. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Right.
We don't respond to this call, and this guy decides, well, fuck that. I'm just going to go start shooting people. So you guys knew about this dude, and you didn't do anything.
What do we pay you for?
Exactly.
You can't fucking win.
So is that going to pass the headline test? As like I referred to? No, it's not. So yeah,
Right.
we're going to go whatever. So I get down there and scouting out the house. I drive by. I'm like, hey, I'm on scene. I got this car in the driveway. Blah blah blah. I drive around and I come back and I park on the opposite side of the street and I'm looking to the northeast, if you will. And out there for 13 minutes watching the house, and that's extremely significant for the Survivors Guild part of it, and you'll hear why. I'm out there watching the house. I'm feeding intel to the guys, which is nothing. I've got no vehicle traffic. I've got no foot traffic. I've got nothing going on. The guy's not out walking around the gun, in front of the house with the gun in his hand or anything else. Dead quiet, nothing. Okay. So my the supervisor, not my boss, he was another field training officer, sergeant, and he's like, "Hey, we're on our way. What do you got?" Same exact thing, nothing. I got a van in the driveway. Okay, cool. So they start to rally, and I can start to see the patrol cars coming down the street, about 250 yards from the next major intersection, down from where we are, maybe 1,000 yards, whatever it was, neither here nor there. So patrol cars are passing me, and some guys are parking further to the north of the house because we're obviously not going to park in front of it.
Correct.
And so Dave Glasser, with his partner Ryan Lee, pull up, and Dave's like, nobody's blocking in the van. And his thought process was, we want to make sure this guy has limited access.
We can't let this thing go mobile.
Absolutely. That was his thought process. I did have one guy that finally pointed out, he goes, why wouldn't you guys come in from the other side and block in from the passenger side, if you will? Because Dave came in and blocked it in from the driver's side. I said that was just how the conga line was, and we didn't know where the guy was at the time.
Right.
And for us to be able to drive by, flip a bitch, and come back and park it on the other side of the house, that would have put him down range of the front door. So
listen, it was a tactical compromise at the time.
That's exactly what it was, and it was a last second decision. And so they pull up halfway into the driveway, and you said you read the book, where's the guy at?
Yeah, it's in the fucking van.
Sitting inside the fucking driver's seat of that van. 13 minutes I'm watching that house. And had things not gone bad, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But then since things did go bad, basically the guy opens the door, reaches back, and he fires 3 rounds and ultimately kills Dave. I'm like, son of a... So that's where we've got 270-degree coverage around the front of the house. The idea was we're going to get out there and we're going to do what we call surround and call out, which is a very common tactic, which I don't disagree with. However, at some point in time, we still got we got to put a human inside that house, right? Or even a dog. But even with the dog, you're still going to go in there and find.
There'll be a human attached to that dog.
Even with a drone, yeah, you can see a lot. You can't see it all. You got to put human eyes on that right. thing. Whatever. So that was the plan, surround and call out. It just unfortunately didn't happen the way we hoped it would, and because Murphy, that you already mentioned, Murphy stepped in and just completely fucked everything up. Dave goes down, gunfire ups. By this time, I'm out of my car, and I'm kind of pointing down range, northeast, about 35 yards out. I hear the gunfire, so instinctively, now same thing. I got the rifle. I'm ready to rock and roll because it's a pretty big call, right? Even though we got that call several times a week, oh, I'm going to kill myself. I'm never going back, and shots fired. We were very, very used to it. Really, really, really quick side note to the whole thing. We had 7 officer involved shootings in about a 6-week period, right around this whole time when this was going on. So, 4 ambushes, 3 officers shot and 1 killed. And 5 out of those 7 shootings were all in the area that I worked. So this wasn't anything new for us.
Right. No, you guys are rocking and rolling.
Yeah. So we're tactically prepared. We knew. And on the side of that whole thing, we called for SWAT, and they were down at the academy training, which is about 12 or 15 miles away. And they're like, yep, call us when you need us. Well, that's kind of what we're doing, but okay, we can't call the big everything. We get it. Call the helicopter. They're about 15 minutes out. Call a K9. He's about 20 minutes out. But do we have to wait for all the resources, or do we just do what we're going to do? Call the guy to our battleground and get him to come to us, kind of a thing. That was the plan.
Yeah.
And on basically a patrol level side of things, that we got to use what we have, the tools that we're afforded, which is not, we don't have shields, we don't have an armored car, we don't have all these other things. So basically it's just our tactics. Yeah,
you're not rolling up with a Bearcat right now. And no.
They did after, of course, but by then.
After the fact.
Right. Yeah. So again, whatever, it's another thing. But anyway, so Dave goes down, gunfire ups. I come up for what ended up being my first volley rounds, safety catch off, finger on the trigger, which is, in all reality, I say about 2.5 seconds. Right. So I show a video of me on the range when I put in about 2.49 seconds. I put 10 rounds in an 8-inch circle from about 10 yards out. So you figure that in 2.5 seconds, if I can put 10 rounds in you, so can the bad guy, right? So that's the training point there for that one. Come up, and I put my first set of rounds into his middle window because my my theory of deduction is, well, he's not over here by the hedge. He's not at the front window. He's not at the door. He's not walking around the van. He must be inside there. And so I thought, well, I've got to make a decision on where these rounds are going to go. So I put them into his middle window. And you would think that you put 10 rounds of rifle rounds down range, that should solve the problem. And here's where I made my very first mistake. As soon as I get done shooting, what do you think I do?
He came off
The fucking target, right? So and this is what I taught on the range for quite a while, especially when you start getting close. Don't start counting your rounds on paper, because nobody gives a shit. Stay on target, do that follow through. Boom, I'm up there, bam, 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 bam. And the first thing I do, I come off muzzle, and what do you think happens? Of course, I don't kill the guy.
Right, he pops.
But I have an opportunity to kill the guy, so the fucking guy starts shooting back at me, reaches out that same middle window, cranks off 3 rounds at me, and actually missed my head by centimeters. I could hear and feel the rounds going past my head. Holy shit. Now I'm realizing, wait a second, all the other ones were the target turns, raise and fire 2 rounds, and then wait for the pizzas. Yeah, well, that didn't happen on this one, because I put those rounds down range, and I'm expecting it to be over with, because that's how my brain was trained up until that. I've defeated all my prior enemies up until this point. This should be no different. Yeah, no, guess what? So when he kind of started shooting back at me, I'm like, holy shit. So I moved off the line, came back up, put another, I estimate between 12 and 15 more rounds into him for a total of 22. That's what finally put him down. So, and then that was the beginning of the dynamic of the ending, if you will. And let me take a little quick step back. So Dave was shot at 3 times and killed. I was shot at 3 times and survived. So now you've got compounding survivor's guilt on top of that whole thing. So
that's something to fucking wrestle with, isn't it, brother?
Oh, huge. That took me a year to get past the whole idea that there was nothing I could do to stop this thing from happening. With everything that I had in my ability, with all my TAC training, all my background, all my experience, all this other kind of stuff, the decision had already been made that Dave was going to go home that day, either in a car accident, or he's going to, fall and hit his head, or he's going to get shot and killed. It was already decided. That took a long, hard struggle and eye-opening experience to finally reach that conclusion. So
how did you get through that, Chris?
It was a whole lot of denial.
Do the listener a favor, man, because trauma touches all of us, man, and we either deal with it or we don't.
Right.
And it doesn't take away the pain of it, but so how did you come to be sitting here right now after that horrific day?
I was very, very fortunate that what looked like rock bottom for me was basically anxiety attacks. Rock bottom for a lot of other folks is alcoholism, attempted suicide, and a long list of other potential things that you do to medicate yourself on whatever level that is. For me, I never got to that point, but it was a lot of denial. I'm like, I'm good, pounding my chest like we do. And because I went to the city psychiatrist like we do twice, Phoenix had just come up with a new plan back in November of 2015, that any kind of officer involved critical incident that we get ourselves with or get involved with, you're going to get sent to another location or home for 30 days, which is okay. That's not a bad plan. Except that they didn't really follow through that very well. So what ends up happening with our guys on our particular scene, they all got sent to like headquarters to go work with, assaults detectives or petty crimes or whatever it happened to be. And these guys are going, this is not where I want to be. So for me, what I did, I went home and tried to just let it all go, which of course, being a busybody.
How'd that work out for you?
Did not work out for me at all, because what I started doing, and we'll talk about this when the opportunity comes up, is triggers. Because I had been through this several times before, so I kind of knew not only the shootings and all the other shit, but I'm talking about the funerals and the divorce and all this other kind of shit that I'd been going through. So my triggers were out here, but for me, they were all right here. And I'm like, I know what it's going to be. And I started creating my own triggers like a fucking dumbass. Right. So when it actually did happen in real life, they were anything but what I expected them to be. So I'm sitting at home, and I had moved out of my house in October of 2015, so I'm completely alone. I've got no real true support system. I can't go back to work. So I'm sitting at home for about 7 weeks. Just, I'm out playing, riding my motorcycle and enjoying
Right.
all this kind of stuff. But what I wasn't doing was facing those demons and taking it on board. I was putting it all on the back burner.
Yeah.
And when I got back from my rides, it was all still there. So that was
Yeah.
part of the
Not 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 thinking about it doesn't mean we're addressing it.
Oh, absolutely. No, I did the right thing. I went to a psychiatrist and had my little conversations, and I very quickly realized that wasn't enough. So fast forward. So this is probably August-ish. So this happens in May. Right around August, I started realizing that when I was in the academy, I had a guy from another agency come in and tell his story about his shooting, which was pretty gnarly. I'm like, wow, of course, at the time, I'm like, that shit don't happen. Fuck that. No one's gonna
Yeah.
know us, you know. And I realized later that the impact that that story had on my direction of my career was very, very impactful. And it hit me. I'm like, man, I got to start telling my story to the kids. I call them.
Right.
I started going down to the recruit classes and just giving a quick whatever 5, 10, 15, however long I could be there in the academies and tell them my story. That was huge because that started releasing a lot of that stuff out of my brain going, hey, if I can talk about it, maybe at some point I can change somebody else's life as well.
Right.
That's where the beginning of the healing started for me.
Making
uh,
some sense of that pain, brother.
it was hugely cathartic at the time, but it wasn't nearly enough.
Hmm.
um, so I sought out a personal psychiatrist, even though the city paid for it, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
And that was a big challenge as well, because just being able to cross that threshold and go admitting that I wasn't okay. I'm like, oh, I'm fine,
Yeah.
still doing this shit.
Gotcha.
And I made a comment to one of my EAU buddies, the employee assistance unit friends. I said, hey, I'm gonna go find a place to hide. And he's like, fucking sit down. I'm like, what? He goes, dude, I've known you for 15 years or whatever else. He goes, Chris Hoyer is not the guy that goes and hides. You're going to go get into shit. That's what you do. So what the fuck? Sit down. And fast forward, they pulled me from the street and sent me to the rifle range, which ended
Okay.
up the greatest moves I could have ever done. And so I thought I was, because my whole thought process, very much like most of your listeners probably, is that, dude, I need to get back with my 40-hour family. I need to get back on the street. I need to go out
Yeah.
there and prove myself I can do all this great shit. And that's where I was in the beginning. And because I was so arrogant to think that it wasn't touching me, I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, you can't go through a 4.5 second gunfight where you got to kill a dude, you almost die, and watch an officer get killed in front of your face. You're not okay.
Right.
There's no fucking way. So I accepted that, took it on board, got to the range, and I thought, because of what my agency promised me, I was going to finish up my 20 up there. Yeah, no, that wasn't to
No, it
be.
didn't happen.
And so this now fast forward to March of 2017. Been at the range for coming up on about 7 months. And the day I find out that I'm collectively being sent back to the street, I triple failed the basic rifle qual. Triple failed.
Rifle instructor, been in couple
Right.
shooting,
Right.
pinpoint accuracy. You know the platform inside and out.
Now being at the range for 7 months, all we did was just go fuck around and shoot all day. So I was lights out with the rifle. I could hold my own clearly by
Of
that point.
course.
But now, I find this out, and not only did I fail it the first time, and to my credit, okay, if you throw one round, then you're done. That's it.
Right.
So it's not like you have a score. You put one outside the gray, you're done. I'm like, okay. So I failed it the first time, come back, immediately do it again, fail it the second time. Come back 24 hours later, clear my head out. I'm like, all right, I'm good to go. Concentrating. Bam, I failed it for time number 3. And then if that weren't enough, I got to come back for the 10-hour research class that I used to teach.
You're the instructor. Yeah, that's a slap in the face.
Oh, dude, it was
Oh my God.
pretty demeaning. It really was.
Yeah, that's humbling.
So get through all that, get back to the street, and I'm not gonna lie, dude, I was fucking scared to death. I remember one of the first times we're back on the street, and I'm plain clothes. I got my most trusted partner with me. We're in an unmarked car. I'm completely geared up. I got my rifle. I got a patrol car I can see in front of me. I got a patrol car behind me, and I'm terrified that I'm going to get into another ambush. And I couldn't shake the feeling, like hyper overly sensitive that this is just going to go bad for me again, which it didn't, luckily.
Right.
So fast forward again, I have what ended up being my first real trigger going back to the street. And long story short, basically we respond to a hot call. It's a subject with a gun, not shots fired, a subject with a gun. We get out there, and the trigger came when I start seeing all the guys from Dave's scene, and I'm like, holy shit, there's Joe, there's Ryan.
I've seen this before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right.
All these guys.
Yeah, exactly what it was. And I had a fucking huge panic attack, took off running back to the car. My partner, very trusted guy, he's like, you good? And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Let's
And
get out of here.
What I took away from that, though, which is huge, is that, okay, it was an uncontrolled environment. I get that. But I know that everybody left that scene safe. And that was the trigger that pushed me forward. It was a very huge revelation. I'm like, oh my God, okay, the last time I was here, somebody didn't leave safely. And that was a huge pushback. Now this one, everybody left safe. It was like, oh, thank God.
I think you referred to it as a positive trigger.
I did, yes.
Kind of letting you know that this scene's going to be okay.
All right. And it will happen. I guarantee 100% you will be triggered at some point in time. And this is what I've started to realize over the last couple of years since I retired, is that when you do have a trigger, there's a high probability, hopefully, that you're in a safe place. Okay. If you are in a safe place, just recognize that first. Okay, I'm safe. Okay, whatever it happens to be. If you happen to be on a scene or whatever else, navigate through the scene, be done, process it afterwards, and then realize, okay, what was the trigger to start with? And then what was the ending result of why that happened? Did I leave there safely, or did something else bad happen? And then you realize that, like in my scene, there's nothing I can do to stop that from happening.
Right.
And if you have a bad trigger, you take it on board and realize it's like, okay, well, that was a bad trigger. How do I navigate through that doesn't happen again? And if it does, I survived it this time, I'm going to survive it this time as well. And then I'm just going to move forward, and you're not going to put it in the back of your mind and just deny it. You're just going to learn from it and take something away from it as a positive.
So you're thinking like accept it and kind of like reframe it for what it actually was. Like everybody's good. And all right, so that's my takeaway. And hopefully next time, either the trigger will be a little less, or I'll be able to catch it and stop myself before it manifests itself into some disabling behavior, right?
And it's going to be different for everybody. Every scene is going to be different. Every response is going to be different. Everything that you experience is going to be different than you and I being in the same gunfight. You're going to have a different perspective than I am. You're going to have a different trigger than I am, or whatever else, because whatever's going on in your mind and your personal life with your boss or whatever, and you're going to be like, okay, but am I still here? Yeah. Am I okay? Yeah. So you move forward from it, because
it all plays into it. Yeah, man.
What, in all reality, what choice have you got? Are you going to fucking spend the next 10 years being worried about something you can't control? No, right. You fucking take a positive out of it, and then you move forward. So
that's the only way to go about it. That's the only way to go about it.
Okay. Having said that, I'm not saying that it's easy. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
You already earlier. Right. I'm here as a resource for your folks at any point in time. Right. If you're like, dude, you're fucking full of shit, you don't know, call me up. So
right. I think that's the other thing, man. I think people confuse if you say something or I say something because we've made it through we're not saying that it's not going to suck. We're not going to say it's not going to be difficult. We're not going to be say that any of this is easy. But what we are saying is that there's a pathway.
Absolutely. Yes. You said it way better than I can. So go around and around.
It's all right, brother. That's why we're here, man. We're here supporting each other. Hey, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time, brother. I appreciate you walking back and going through that history with us. If there's one thing that you would leave the listener with, man, this is a heavy law enforcement first responder listenership, and maybe they're rolling into work. Maybe they're on their way home and they've had one of those days. Maybe that day came, and they're having a hard time, man, just trying to figure out the why of it all and trying to move forward. What's some things that you'd like to share with them before we wrap it up, brother?
Well, I'm going to steal a quote from Dave Grossman, and then I'm going to use one that I created on my own just by accident, because when I moved to California, I thought that at 51, I think I was when I moved out here. So I'll be 54, I think, pretty soon. Is that right? I don't even remember, but
You're still
whatever.
a kid, bro. You're
I
still a
know,
kid.
right? Um, I started looking at going back into the law enforcement community, and I found out I had to go back and restart the academy all over again. I'm like, oh, no, that ain't gonna happen. No offense, but I'm not
Right.
going to start that shit. Whatever, that's another story. But what I did was, during that process, I actually ended up finding, and you can see it, it's right over my shoulder right here to the back. I found my oath of office, and just for shits and giggles, I read it because I haven't read that thing probably since I got it. Right, and why the
Right, right.
you get it, you stick it on your wall. You got your worship me wall, like you got your challenge
Yeah,
coins.
man, got my coins.
You're like, yeah, I mean, how much really attention do we pay to that kind of stuff
Right.
anymore? And I actually read it, and I'm like, holy shit, I completely had forgotten the importance of why I joined this profession. It's like, man, yeah, I mean, for me, it was mostly out of fun and having the insurance and chasing bad guys and all that stuff. But what I learned from my experiences very early on in my career was, man, I have a purpose of what I'm doing. And I know you talked about this last night. It's a calling. It's not something that normal people want to do, because who puts on a fucking vest and goes and runs to the sound of gunfire?
Yeah.
I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
Guys like us, girls like us, you know? And so that's one of my points is, hey, go back and read that oath of office and remember, again, sitting in that background investigator's office going, I'll do whatever it takes. Give me this job and I'm going to be there.
Yeah, man.
Well, sometimes this is what it takes, and you fucking realize that you're like, oh shit, I got my ass handed to me today, and well, that's what it takes. How do you get through it? But very much like we just talked about, a lot of stuff. The second half is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, one of my heroes. I'll say it 20 more times. His quote that I stole from him is, know that your sacrifice is for a noble and worthy purpose. And it's absolutely true, man. I mean, I could not agree more. And for what the folks that are still out there on the front lines are doing, it's for a noble and worthy purpose. Don't ever, ever forget that. So
That is an awesome thing to. And if I may be so bold, I had a conversation with the colonel, and he left me with something that that I have committed to memory, and it was John 15:13,
let
and you have it in your book.
me show you this really quick.
Yeah,
I don't know
man.
if you see that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My girlfriend got that, and I got my own over here on this side. That's my personal Dave Grossman one as well. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah, sorry
That
to catch
is
up. Yeah, go ahead, bro.
no, man. That's awesome. Greater love has no man than this, that he sacrificed his life for his friends. And then the colonel goes on to say, which I thought was so poignant, maybe the greatest expression of love isn't to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice.
Yeah,
And that's what you're doing, man. And that's what I appreciate so much about you, is that living that life of sacrifice. Hey, Chris, if folks want to get in touch with you, they want to have you come speak to their troops or their organization, how can we follow you? How can we get in touch with you? How can we get a copy of this book when that day comes, Training for the Fight by Christopher Hoyer?
Best way is probably my email. I do have a website which is still in construction. I'm all over social media, of course, Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But
I'll put all your information, your LinkedIn profile, and all that good stuff. I'll put that in the show notes so people can reach out to you and have you present and maybe get some training on the gun, and whatever services you can bring to them, they'll be better off for being in your presence. That's for sure.
I travel all over the country, speaking and training and whatever else. I'll go anywhere. I don't really care where it is. Natalie and I just got back from New England a couple months ago. I was up there speaking in Greenland, New Hampshire, which was completely awesome. Had a great time with that. We're going to be in San Francisco in 2 weeks, I think it is, or something like that. So we go all over. Usually she comes with me if I get the opportunity to bring her. So
That's awesome, man. That's all.
but
Well, I'm looking forward to one day meeting you in person, brother.
yeah,
And I have a feeling that that'll happen sooner rather than later.
I think so too, man. Because I'm slotted to be out in Florida here. I think June or July, if I'm not mistaken. I'm hoping if it goes through. So.
All right. Well, you let me know, and we'll definitely connect. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Hoyer, brother, thanks for your time, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.